Hey, Morgan, can you hear us? Testing 1, 2. Okay, yeah.
Test 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Oh.
I get into trouble, but it's like her. I should give us. How are you? For you.
Unmute on Zoom now.
I am not muted.
You should not be putting out any sound still because no mics are on.
I just turned on. Hello.
Yeah.
I don't think that's coming through on Zoom. Hold on, let me make sure. Oh, it is. It is.
Right in the chest. Anyway, PJ said it was a situation, the county sheriff minded and trying to survive. That and guy with firearm ended up shooting 8 officers, killed his trooper, of course, that was.
179.
Shot.
Good afternoon, everyone. As chair of the Arkansas School Safety Commission, I'd like to call our meeting on July 5th, 2022 to order. Hope everybody had an awesome 4th of July. It was nice to be able to have that extra day break. And I guess in doing so, I did make a mistake on the agenda, which I'll get to in a second. First thing that I want to mention to everybody is that Secretary Cook has been given some additional assignments and is no longer going to be able to serve on the commission. Joe Du Bois has been appointed by Governor Hutchinson to take her place. Is Joe here today? Okay,
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
don't see Joe.
I'm here via Zoom.
Oh, he's on the Zoom.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me okay, Joe? There you are.
Yes, ma'am.
So Joe's on the Zoom. Joe, thank you very, very much for being willing to step in. And let me just say this, because I've had the opportunity to work with Secretary Cook for a very, very long period of time. She's an extraordinary, fabulous job when she and was doing a phenomenal job as chair of the Communications and Intelligence Committee. So as chair, I just want to thank her for her extraordinarily valuable service. I have asked Chris Chapman, Chief Chapman, to serve as chair of the Intelligence and Communications Committee, and he has agreed. So thank you, Chief, very, very much. Having said that, the first item of business on our agenda is to approve the minutes. I know Angela sent you all copies of the minutes, and I will entertain the appropriate, or I will entertain a motion when appropriate.
I move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
We have Sheriff Helder moving for approval and Director Kane seconded to that motion. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Motion passes. Minutes are finalized. Okay, today we actually have two presentations, not one, as indicated on the agenda. I'm inadvertently left Hope Worsham off of our list of attendees today. Like I said, that's what happens when you actually get a day off. It causes part of your brain to shut down a little bit. Hope's with the Division of Elementary and Secondary Ed, and we're very, very grateful that she's going to present as well today. And my apologies for the oversight, Hope. The first group that's going to present is a group that I had the opportunity to meet with on Friday. And Chad Johnston and Mark Kirby are part of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, CISA, which stands for Cybersecurity Infrastructure. I'm going to mess it up. Security Agency, CISA. They are the top dogs when it comes to cybersecurity in the country. And many of you may not know this, but CJI is actually the lead in a consortium called the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium. And we partner with 5 different institutions. We're going to present at an upcoming, I think, Intel and Communications Subcommittee. But we're 5 educational institutions. We've been formally funded, some of us, since 2004, and we provide cybersecurity training all across the country. Chad reached out to me and wanted us to meet, and there have been very few meetings that I've had, and he's over here laughing, but there have been very few meetings I've had when I have gotten tremendously excited. All about sharing resources, all about not duplicating effort, all about collaboration. I think each and every one of you know that when it comes to collaboration, that's one of the most important things that we can do, especially with limited resources, limited staffing, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to recreate the wheel. So since I just met them on Friday, I was amazed at the number of resources that they have for K through 12. And so what I asked Chad and Mark Kirby to do today is to give us a brief overview of what CISA in Arkansas can do, and then we can talk a little bit about maybe what we talked about doing together. So you guys are going to have to come up here. I have to sit next to Mr. Gossage, so. But thank you. Yeah, no, you guys are going to both have to come up here.
Look at the front.
I get this place.
Thank you, Dr. May, for the introduction. It was definitely a great meeting last week that we had with Dr. May and also with some folks with the Arkansas Division of Emergency Management. And when Dr. May had mentioned collaboration, that's a huge thing for us. The different programs that I'll cover on the physical security side, and Mark will cover on the cybersecurity side, is trying to make sure that we collaborate, coordinate with things that are going on in the state to try to help support things that are going on in the state. And as I go through a lot of these different things, when we talked about partnerships and collaboration, a lot of programs that we deliver to critical infrastructure partners, including schools, is coordinated very closely with Mr. AJ Gary's group at Arkansas Division of Emergency Management. We try to make sure that we collaborate and coordinate on the different resources that they have as well. So before I get into the different programs that we do on the protective security side, just to give you a little bit of background on the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We've been around for a little bit, I believe a little bit over 2 years, or right at 2 years. The organization that was the predecessor to CISA was the National Programs and Preparedness Directorate, which no one really understood what that was. It was one of those things where we wanted to streamline what we do and what we deliver out into the community, which is the protective security and cybersecurity elements. So that came about to streamline and create the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We move forward. We're a young agency with different components that are a little bit older, but I think for each of the districts that we work in, try to make sure we integrate is very important as we move forward with the future of our agency. So some of the things you have in front of you is the DHS CISA Protective Security Programs, one of the handout. That's one of the things I'll be presenting from for the physical security side. And all of the information, if you want more detail or you want fact sheets or any other publications, it's all on the CISA.gov website that you'll be able to pull down. There's an infrastructure security section and then a cybersecurity section that you can pull from. And then the second handout is one of the things that Mark will be talking from on the cybersecurity side, which has the cybersecurity assessments. And on the back of that, it also has the physical security assessments that we have as well. So before we get into anything else on the assessments, we're not a regulatory agency, we're a voluntary agency. So if we're working with energy sector or chemical sector or schools or government sector or anything like that, we have 16 different sectors that we work in. So from a week-to-week basis, we could be working with a lot of different organizations. We are voluntary because we want to have a good information flow. Sometimes when I've worked on regulatory side, there can be a little bit, some restrictions here and there, but being voluntarily and non-regulatory, we want to make sure that we have good information sharing and analysis. The other thing is being voluntary is that you're sharing information with us and we want to protect that information. We have a protected critical infrastructure security information program that protects the information that you share to us from FOIA, civil litigation, those different types of things. So there's a different protections on those avenues as we do assessments. So And the other thing is that there is no cost to these assessments. It's funded by taxpayer money, and that is one of the benefits of having that different programs. We have those no costs with that associated with the assessments. So the first thing I want to talk about is the security assessment at first entry. We have larger assessments, security assessments, and this is on the DHS CISA Protective Security Programs handout. We have larger assessments that we have that can take many hours, sometimes many months to do. We realize that there are some facilities that might want a very simplistic executive level assessment. So we created a security assessment at first entry, which gives you about say a 15-page report that gives you options for considerations and different things to move forward, different resources and links that you can utilize from those options for consideration that we identify. That usually takes about 1 to 2 hours. And again, as we go through a lot of these different things, I want to figure out ways that any of these assessments can support things that this commission is doing or different organizations is doing. So as we read through these different things, think about ways that we can integrate in and support what you're doing across the state. The second assessment tool that we have is the larger one. It's the infrastructure survey tool. That tool takes about 4 to 6 hours, sometimes a little bit longer. The reason that takes a little bit longer is that we have almost thousands of questions that we would ask the owners and operators or different leaderships, emergency management, security personnel at organizations or even at school districts. And we have formulas tied to each of those questions. And the reason we have formulas tied to each of those questions is that at the end of the infrastructure survey tool process, you would get a planning dashboard. So it gives you a dashboard of your current capability, and it also gives you a scenario capability where you can run scenarios on if you didn't have a security plan in the school district and you were to add a security plan into the school district. The planning dashboard allows you to see how much, as far as Homeland Security looks at that specific capability, how much having a plan would increase your capability compared to like facilities across the United States. We have counterparts that are across the United States that are doing assessments similar to these, and those dashboards build out high, average, and low in security, in emergency management, in continuity of operations, those different types of areas. Now, those high, average, and lows, you can't see, individuals that have the dashboard can't see specific facility or organization information, and then the others can't see your information. It just allows you to have a high, average, and low of like facilities across the United States. And we're very big in making sure that we have that correct process set up. I'm not going to compare a school district with a chemical facility or a chemical facility with a standard business facility. We want to make sure that we have like facilities when we do the analysis. So in addition to the dashboard, you also get a larger executive level report. I say executive level, but it's usually about 25 to 45 pages, depending on the option for consideration. So the infrastructure survey tool process gives you two different things, which is that larger report and the dashboard. As we move forward with those different assessments, one of the things we realize is that critical infrastructure, whether it be a school district or an energy facility or electric facility or water facility, is very complex. And sometimes these individual assessments doesn't give you the whole picture of what's going on in infrastructure systems. So we created the multi-asset and system assessment process that allows owners and operators, leadership at school districts to say, where's my risk in the entire school district? So it gives you a process to look at about 50 or 60 different risks, and you can compare that and see what is your most priority facility, what's your highest risk facility per the questions that we ask. Yes, ma'am.
Did you mention the program that you use, the U.S. Department of Ed?
Yes. So we are very, as far as the RIMS, we're very big in supporting the RIMS technical assistance programs. They in any of these different assessments, we can provide different links, and we heavily provide links on the RIMS technical assistance program that has the assessments for walkthrough risk assessments that you have on the apps, emergency operation plan assist process. And just recently, we went out and did a joint assessment with the folks at Arkansas Division of Emergency Management, and that was heavily discussed at one of the school districts. So our success for us is not just handing out or making CISA programs available. Our success is that each and every one of you know all the different resources that are out there. We want to be a resource link or a belly button link to where if you need something and we can't provide that, I might know of something that AJ's group is doing, or maybe another federal agency is doing that can provide resources. So we're a resource for all resources. That's one of the things that we look at. So we're very big on making sure that other resources are made known in our assessment process as we move forward. So that was a very good point. We had a really good discussion about that.
Yeah, what he's specifically talking about is under the U.S. Department of Education is the REM Center, and that's their primary school safety information. And they have developed a program called Site Assess. And Site Assess is something that we've promoted for years. It's something that the audits and EOPs and drill section is talking about as well. So that level of consistency, I think, is really important.
It's a really good point. I've a lot of different resources and utilization of technology. So I'm really happy about those different programs. So I'm going to kind of skip around. One of the other areas I want to focus on is on the front page is the infrastructure dependency and interdependency all hazard planning. I think dependency and interdependencies is extremely important in protection of and risk reduction of critical infrastructure. We know that different pieces of critical infrastructure are reliant on other pieces of critical infrastructure, and having situational awareness of what those are, again, going to a school district, knowing what that school district is reliant on as far as some of the lifeline critical infrastructure sectors, and having that situational awareness of how to maybe go about protecting that a little bit more leading up to the facility, and then also having the awareness of developing continuity of operations plans if those things were to be impacted. So a lot of that is situational awareness and how to move forward with those different types of processes. So that dependency and interdependency gives you a visualization. So each owner and operator, school district, or whatever it might be, could have a visual depiction of where their dependencies are, interdependencies are, and kind of have a visual depiction of planning for that. So moving down at the bottom of the page, we have a program that's called Securing Public Gathering Program. And if you flip over to the back side of the sheet, we have a section in schools. Our agency does have a school safety program that can support RIMS, that can support this commission. Again, I want it to be something that is a resource that can be in your toolkit so that you can pull out and utilize as needed. So we have a lot of different exercises, tabletop exercises, planning platforms that are focused around the safe schools. So for us, you can research that, you can look at that, or we can do more in-depth briefings on what those different programs are. We do have assessments that are available with that. For me, I also look at the RIMS assessment is very top notch, the process that they have. If you wanted to go through that and then maybe look at doing just another assessment just to kind of see a different view, that's available as well. When we go out and we do physical security assessments at facilities, we encourage folks to look at other ways of doing security assessments at their facilities, because we don't want us to be the only place that a company or organization goes to. We want them to have kind of a holistic approach on doing the assessment process. So a lot of different programs that are available on the Safe School side. Active shooter preparedness. I know that's continuously being put in the forefront of the news. We do have some different workshops. It's a non-tactical process, but we look at how you do active shooter preparedness planning. How do you integrate local emergency management? How do you integrate local law enforcement? How do you integrate local EMS into your planning process? So we do have a kind of a whole community approach on how we do some of those planning efforts. Insider threat mitigation, going down the page. Sometimes that's a hard process to talk about, but we do have programs that look at what are some of the indicators of possible insider threat and how do you work through those different processes as well. Continuing to move down the page, improvised explosive device awareness training. We do see some of those events, whether it be non-events, you have a device that's on a bridge or something like that, but we do see those within the state. And we do have different awareness programs that are available to provide planning aspects for risk reduction. So these are awareness courses that are available for counter IED planning. We have on those different planning tools, we have search and detection. So we can utilize those for a lot of the university law enforcement staff or local law enforcement that support special events. You can utilize those to have more of a just-in-time training that can supplement some of the things that are already going in those jurisdictions. So there's a lot of good resources on the bombing side. And even for school districts, it's good for just to have situational awareness about search and detection procedures, different expectations that could be going on the counter IED side. Again, it's all about awareness and preparedness efforts. So the getting down to the last two, the critical infrastructure security exercise program. I think this is a very, very good program that our exercise group has developed. We have what is called the CISA tabletop exercise packages. If you go on to the website that's on the back on the front of the page, infrastructure-security, or even on the cybersecurity side for CISA, you'll be able to find about 30 to 45 different tabletop templates that you can utilize and pull from different disasters, different risks that we commonly have seen. There's also a section in there that talks about complex coordinated attacks. So you could develop a tabletop exercise that's specific to a physical threat, but then also has a cyber component into that. And that's what I want to kind of end with is the program that Mark and I, we outreach on this a lot, is the cyber and physical security convergence. We believe that physical security or the critical infrastructure is very complex, and we see threat actors as trying to utilize any means possible to disrupt critical infrastructure. And that cyber and physical convergence could be a way that threat actors look at disrupting things, whether they have a physical attack and then disrupt communications on the cyber side. So we're trying to make sure that we think outside the box on how we do risk reduction with our programs and within the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to talk about the range of cybersecurity assessments.
Thanks, Chad. So as Chad mentioned, our focus really has been, I look at myself as a risk advisor. He's a risk advisor. I happen to specialize in cybersecurity. He happens to specialize in protective or physical security. And really it's working together and helping people understand that you can't really look at one or the other separately anymore. It's become a holistic process. Think of your house, think of everything that you own, think of your cars nowadays. You've got the physical side that you need to look at, but also the cybersecurity side. And so really breaking those traditional silos down is kind of really key to Chad and I's outreach on how we want to help the state, become better prepared. So as Chad mentioned, they have a whole bunch of no-cost services for the protective side. The cyber side does as well, as far as assessments and actual technical skills or technical services that we provide. And so starting on with the range of cybersecurity assessments, the cyber resilience review is really that policy and procedure type of assessment. And really what we're looking at is from a director or C-level person, that you're what policies and procedures do you have in place currently? And have you really stepped outside the box and looked at everything that you should be taking into consideration, whether it's policy and procedures related to people, information, technology, or facilities? And this one, like in Chad's, is a very in-depth one. We're looking about 300 questions. It takes approximately 8 hours to do. But at the end, what you get is a executive level summary, a high level look at how you compare to other like organizations. So you know, knowing having done a couple of these now, you know, the comparison data, a lot of organizations think that, hey, we're doing this really good, but when we compare them to other organizations throughout the United States, to come to find out they're lacking. Maybe they're lacking in asset management or incident response or training, different things like that. And so what that helps the directors and the leaders of the organizations understand is, hey, maybe we need to spend or invest in these areas to bring these areas up versus, you know, other areas that we may not be able to do. And a lot of times we can help identify those gaps in your security programs as well, and say, hey, you know, if you do these just a little bit, you're gonna not be the low-hanging fruit in that area anymore. And really, that's the goal is that you know, you crawl, walk, run. We understand that you can't just do everything all at one time, that you have to take step by step in order to increase your security posture. The external dependencies management, as more and more organizations have outsourced either the IT departments or they're storing their data on the cloud, different things like that. It's really understanding what your relationships are with other people that handle or manage your data. Because if you don't know, or there's a false expectations management thinking, oh, they're going to secure our data as well as we secure our own, that may not necessarily be the case. As we've seen more and more that the threat actors are actually going through those managed service providers, because sometimes their security is not that well, and they're able to get into those networks. And knowing that the type of type of information that you carry for the education school system, you know, that could be a very prime target for those threat actors out there. And so what we're really doing is that we're helping you understand those security caps as well. And they also map to either the cybersecurity framework, NIST, HIPAA, and a couple other ones from the financial market. The other one that we work on is the cyber infrastructure survey. And really that's looking at your controls. What basic controls do you have in place in the organization? Are you using, you know, ways to segment your traffic, to say only these people have the rights to look at this? Where is our data being stored at? What type of security controls are we putting in place to make sure that only the right people that we want to have access to that information have access to that information? And the first of all, I'll go ahead and do the cybersecurity evaluations tool as well. That's a downloadable package from CISA. And what it allows you to do is it contains a multitude of different assessments. You can take those, you can do them yourself, pick out, you know, one of them is ransomware. You can see how susceptible you are internally to ransomware attacks, things like that. As we go down to item number 5, we're starting to get into technical services. That's really handled by our national team. These are those no cost technical services for like phishing campaign. How susceptible are people to clicking on links in emails? That's 91% of most attacks happen that way, because if they can get you to click a link, they've pretty much bypassed all the security. They've been able to bypass all the security things that you have in place on your network. And so it's really helping you understand how much training do I need to invest in to help my people understand this link is bad. You know, a lot of times it's easy ones. Most people know you didn't inherit the $10 million from a rich Nigerian uncle. But if it came in and said, hey, HR wants you to update your records, and you click that link and it's got a payload into it, well, you've now potentially infected your system. And so it's really kind of giving you an idea. And in that manner, you know, it's not going to tell you who clicked the link. It's just going to show you an average of those. It's about a 6-week assessment to do that, or that's handled by the national team. But at the end, you get another executive level summary, kind of showing where you may need to work at or improve your training programs. The other one that is highly recommended is the vulnerability scanning and hygiene tool. And really that's looking at all your external, I won't go into too much technical jargon. Anyways, it's looking at how your house looks to everybody else. Are your windows open, so to speak? and it's constantly sending you those threats saying, hey, you need to update this, you need to update that. And so you get a report on how vulnerable your network is to potential threat actors, because if we see it, they can see it. And so that's what it's really helping you to identify. The validated architecture design review, this one, these next two really take about 18 months to 2 years to get on schedule to get done, just because of the technical skill sets that are involved. But this is where it's going through your network and giving you a full analysis of how your network operates, how all your configuration settings are. Having done this for 35 years with the DoD, you know, people change, things change all the time. Things get easily overlooked. So we're just kind of giving you a snapshot to say, hey, you know, maybe some of these ways that to do business before are no longer as effective now, and help you potentially modify your configurations to make them more secure. And then the risk and vulnerability assessment, that's like a penetration testing. Those can be, I know can be very costly to have organizations have done, but this is, once again, this is all free, just takes a little while to be on the list. But if you already have those type of things in place for school districts and things, well, it's just an augmented tool. You know, it's don't rely on just us. I always say have a lot of options, have comparison data to make sure that you're making the right decisions when it comes to, you know, whether we need to change this vulnerability or we need to address this vulnerability right now or at a later time. I think we already touched on that these are all free services. And as a matter of fact, most of these are downloaded. So if you don't want these to be facilitated assessments, you can actually download them and do them internally yourself if you don't want the to participate in any of the programs. But the same program Chad talked about, protected critical infrastructure, is the same thing I fall under.
Could you do us a big favor and talk about why mostly today schools are particularly vulnerable?
Oh, so I will say this. I came from the DoD bubble where we don't trust anybody. Well, that's kind of counterproductive to an educational environment, if I understand correctly. And so I'm a firm believer that, you know, yes, you can have an open and learning environment, but there should be controls and processes. And because there's an open environment, it makes it a lot easier for threat actors to get into your system. But you can still have policies and procedures in place to say, hey, before we're not saying you can't go here, but let's have a policy, a way of tracking, and a way to monitor that, so that in the event that those sites or those locations are potentially turned bad, you have a process in place to rectify that immediately with your IT department. Does that hit on the ransomware? And ransomware. Okay. If you don't know what ransomware is yet, you know, that is happening. That has happened to a lot of organizations here in Arkansas. I don't know if we touched on, so not only do we deal with the education, we also deal with state, local, tribal, territorial, and private industry. A lot of businesses here in Arkansas are getting hit by ransomware. But if ransomware gets into your system, does anybody here have a policy or plan in place right now to how do you get a Bitcoin if you have to pay off a cyber threat actor to unlock your data? If your data is compromised, usually they do double blackmail, which is one, they hit you up to unlock your system for whatever set amount, and then they've already probably taken the data that they wanted, and they're going to offer to sell you back your own data, or they're going to publish it online. But ransomware is becoming more and more challenging. We even have a website, stopransomware.gov, that has a whole bunch of great information for anybody to take a look at, and you know, just in your personal life or your work life as well.
And you know, one of the things we look at is that we have all these different resources and services, but for us, the most important part of our job is partnerships.
Yes.
Now we want to make sure that we build a partnership and relationship with everyone in this room to support whatever you might need. There's a lot of different resources that are out there. It's really picking the one that works best for your organization, how you want to move forward with it. So we just extremely appreciate it, really excited about getting in front of the group, and really excited about working with you. And so we Dr. May, we really appreciate I mean, it's I will say that it's been a long time since I've been in a meeting with individuals that gets excited like Dr. May did. And I, it was just one of those things where, those are the good days. Those are the good days where I get real motivated to, that I feel like, in the complex world that we live in, things are stacked against the good side. So I always, having meetings like that, I feel optimistic about move forward, on the, those risk reduction things that we have. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna add, and that's one thing about Chad and I, we're both very excited. So, if you can't tell the passion or whatever, we really want to help people understand cybersecurity and physical and help protect, the schools, Arkansas as a whole. And so, any chance that we have to get out and talk about the services or just come out and meet with you and sit down and hear your needs and stuff, we'd be happy to.
And let me just say this. I think what's really important is that these are no cost solutions. These and we've used CISA at CJI, and I'm very proud to say that we have, and the services that we've received have been phenomenal. And the way I learned about you was through a national school safety group that said, hey, CISA's out there, they can do vulnerability assessments, a wide variety of different things. But the connection I didn't make was that you guys, that there was actually a team here in Arkansas on the ground trying to help everybody do what they're doing. So that's the part that got me really excited. But I appreciate you both, and I appreciate everything that you do, because cyber is something, as Mr. Gossage knows, because he also led a task force for the governor that focused on cybersecurity, is that, it's something that we've got to constantly, continuously focus on, because it's so important. Do you want to say anything, Cyber? Right. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So I'm probably not going to get her title right, but Hope Worsham is over our ESSER program director, and is here to talk primarily about the work that she's doing with behavioral health and mental health through our Thrive program, and the smart data dashboards and how those work into creating a safe culture for our schools.
Thank you, Courtney. Guys, can I be letting the Zoom, please, so I can share screen? All right, good. Okay, so as Courtney said, my name is Hope Worsham. I'm ESSER Program Director for the state of Arkansas. And so oversee some of our large projects that we are utilizing ESSER funds to pay for. And two of those today that tie into the work here are Thrive Arkansas Leadership Academy, as well as Smart Data Dashboard. So I'll give you both of those information. And I can share these slides with you when we're done. So starting with Thrive Arkansas is kind of my baby right now. We've just launched our first cohort of leaders that are going through the academy. So Thrive Arkansas really focuses on a positive, proactive approach to supporting positive behavior supports in districts. So our goal is really to equip our building leaders at this point to look at their system, look across their systems, and determine, do we have the right supports in place for all students to have access to mental health and behavioral supports that they need. And that starts with core classroom instruction. What do we do for all kids? And then what do we do for kids that didn't get what they needed from that all place? So a little bit larger, when we started this project, we really talked a lot about our discipline systems. And right now our districts don't have a lot of tools in their tool belt. They really are limited to suspending and in-school suspension. That's a lot of what discipline ends up looking like. And so the goal of Thrive is really to look at our system overall and look at how can we handle behavior differently? What can we do for students in terms of de-escalation tactics? What can we do in equipping our teachers in addressing their well-being so that they can address student well-being? And it really starts at all levels. Thrive is really about looking at the school holistically. It's the adults in the building. It's utilizing every adult in that building. So we talk a lot about you've got school security officers. You've got people coming into your building that are supporting students. You've got librarians, cafeteria workers. You've got all kinds of people in your building. What are they doing and how can we use them to help build this culture of positive support for students? And so that's really what Thrive is all about. This started many years ago. I would say I can't remember when Thrive came, Guide for Life started, but we started in the Division of Learning Services under Miss Stacy Smith's direction of looking at how do we want our students to learn and what is it we really want Arkansas students to come out of school with. And through that conversation, we developed the lenses of learning for Arkansas students. And really that incorporates not only academics, but you'll see at the middle of that kind of circle there in the top right-hand corner, this the Guide for Life. And so the Guide for Life are the personal competencies that the Department of Education worked with a team of educators as well as national experts on utilizing the CASEL standards, which are nationally recognized standards for social emotional learning. And we developed the Guide for Life. It walks through kind of principles and dispositions we should see out of students at every grade level and grade bands. And this was kind of what centered our vision for teaching and learning. And then the academics surround what we want from our students out of that. So when I came on board last July, we had a meeting in October, and that meeting in October had about 40 or 50 people from across the Department of Ed, as well as some of our partners at UAMS, at the local educational cooperatives. Dr. Nikki Edge was there with us. Some others from our cooperatives were there as well. And that meeting really spurred the department to look across all of our systems, like what are we doing right now for behavior and mental health across our systems, and how can we be better coordinated? So from that meeting in October, we formed a smaller kind of focus group of leaders from the department and a few of our projects across the state that support behavior and mental health in an effort for us to really streamline what are we doing and how do we best support districts. So we, out of that work, determined that was really necessary to support districts in developing their system, their local system that addressed positive culture and climate, systematic use of data in collaborative teams. So are we using data to really make decisions about students, or are we just saying all kids don't know X, Y, or Z? So really helping our districts utilize their data well. Us providing high quality training as well as coaching. So not just training and leaving them out there, but coaching our schools through the process and really looking at their overall system for both academics and behavior and mental health. So we have 4 goals, and we are currently in the middle of working on these 4 goals. And the biggest piece of those 4 goals, one was to define what a multi-tiered system of support for behavior and mental health looks like, and then start to train on that. So I'm happy to say in June, we did kick off our Thrive Leadership Academy. And so Thrive Leadership Academy started with 110 leaders from across the state. They represented 93 school buildings and 53 different school districts. So they came together in June for 4 days. They're going to come back together in July, back together in September, and then we will follow and support them across the year into April. And at that time, they will demonstrate what they have done to implement their system. So the goal of Thrive is to bring them together, teach them a little bit about positive behavior supports and looking at their overall system, and then send them away and have them do some stuff and then come back. And so it's this kind of back and forth and supporting them across the year with the goal of ultimately in April, these 110 leaders will have looked across their entire system and started to put processes in place that can help support all students across the building in this idea of positive behavior supports, in well-being for both teachers and students, really looking at the whole child and what we can do in the core classroom to support that. Also, part of this is the tier 2 and tier 3. So when we think about students who have more severe either mental health or behavioral concerns, then that's when we start talking about tier 2 and tier 3. So what does a child need that is more intensive and more intensive? And that's where some of our partners from like Arkansas Aware, the behavior support specialists from across the state come together and support in those other tiers. We do know that there's a need. We started with the need for principals building leaders, but we know that there's a need for district teams to come together and work on this, as well as teacher training. So those are in the pipeline. They're just not immediate right now. And we do plan to build those out in the coming years. We also plan to have additional cohorts at the Thrive Leadership Academy start as early as this fall. Do you want me to go through to Smart Data or stop there for questions? Okay.
I've got one question. There may be some people in the room that might not be familiar with what positive behavioral supports are.
Sure.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so positive behavior support is, if you think about addressing not just addressing the behavior, but addressing the cause of the behavior and from a positive lens. So not just that negative discipline system, that corporal punishment or just sending them home. It's really about equipping our leaders with other ways that they can look at behavior. So, for example, do you have a system in your school that tells kids what they need to do? We call it a behavior matrix, and it literally outlines in the hallway, this is how we behave. In the classroom, this is what we do. But not saying this is what we don't do. This is how we behave. This is how griffins behave. This is how typically they'll use their mascot. But so it's all about looking at what behaviors do we want out of kids and how do we teach them those behaviors from a positive lens and not always have to have the negative. It's not void of consequence. There are consequences. So if a child doesn't behave the way that we want them to, the school still has that ability to discipline as needed. But it's really about setting up the system on the front end to not only teach, but reward positive behavior. Anything else? Okay. So then one of the goals you heard me say was really about using your data well, and Smart Data Dashboards is one of the programs that the department has utilized ESSER funds to pay for. We are providing free access to all districts right now to Smart Data Dashboards, and this really arose, the contract here really arose out of a need from COVID to be able to identify our at-risk students while we had kids kind of in and out virtually. It was a way for us to provide a tool to schools so that they could identify their students who are potentially at risk of falling through the cracks. And so when I talk to districts, we talk a lot about, data is one of the things we tell districts to use all the time. Use your data, and they're drowning in it all the time. I know when I've sat in that seat, that's how I felt. Just what are you asking me to do? And so really the goal of Smart Data is to take all this data that's already at the department, it's already at the district. It's not any new data. We're not gathering new data. It's already here. And just making sense of it. It's really about taking the information that's over here in intervention plans or over here in the assessment portal or over locally at a learning management system and trying to make sense of it in one place so that we're not in this wait to fail model, but really being proactive about knowing who our students are and where they are. So Smart Data is an automated data dashboard, and it's an early warning and early intervention system. That's the purpose. And again, like I said, the data is already out there. It's in eSchool, it's in Triand. It's really just pulling it together and making sense of it. It does allow our districts to easily extract, visualize, and analyze their data. That's the whole point. It's, like I said, just pulling it all together and sensing it in a place that makes sense. So really, the idea, like I said, it's taking all these 10 different data sources, pulling them to one place. And really the challenge for districts is right now, before Smart Data, they had 15 different places to go log in, and they had lots of spreadsheets they're trying to make and manage and make sense of things. We actually showed Smart Data in the Thrive Leadership Academy 2 weeks ago, and our principals were able to pull their 3-year trends in their discipline in about 15 minutes. And something that would have taken them hours before to go dig in eSchool and find, we could do very quickly. And then that allowed them to get to the conversation and to set their goals and make sense of their data rather than spending time digging around for it. So right now, we launched back in July, and so districts have had a year to access the program. We have trained up to almost 70 to 80% of our districts at this point. Usage is not where we want it to be. We still are seeing a little bit of delay in using the product, but the districts that are using it find it valuable for early identifying and early intervening with their students. And then we are making more things available in there that they can utilize within their teams. Let's get past that one. So the state expectation we entered into, we agreed to provide the dashboards for up to 3 years. We're in year 2 currently, and districts do not have to pay for any part of the dashboard at the moment, and it's not required to use. So that's what I'm saying. We're still having some districts that we're not seeing fully use the product, and it's a place we would love to see. But we do know that the company is working very hard this summer. We have a good plan to better support and see the product used across districts. They're also working to build out additional modules and additional access, which I'll talk about. Yep, that's where we're getting to next. Yep. So specifically within the program, there's 4 big dashboards. Administrator, so principal's view. Student at risk view is really where your counselors look. And then equity and discipline, equity and instruction. So let me kind of show you what's in there. When you go to the administrator dashboard, the first thing that your principals will see is their office discipline referrals, ODRs. And then that even is broken down by their general population, their special ed population, and their top 2 ethnicities. So districts can immediately see, am I disciplining boys more than girls? Am I disciplining my white students more than my African-American students? So they can see that quickly. The dashboards change colors depending on if you are disproportionately disciplining students. And then districts have the ability to drill down. So they click any one of these categories and it drills down. They can go to the classroom level. So if a parent says, Miss Worsham's picking on my kid, I could pull up the screen and say, no, Miss Worsham picks on all kids. She has 25 discipline referrals. Okay. So they can drill down, they can see by class, they can see by student, and then you even get down to the individual student. So I can drill very quickly and click on a student, and information that would have taken me going into eSchool, going into Try-In, pulling up, I can quickly see that student. I can see their classroom data, their grades, their attendance, their behavior, all in one place. So I'll get to that real quick. Sorry, there it is. So on this screen, so like I said, they can drill down, users can drill down and get to individual student data. And then there's a risk index. So based on the attendance, behavior, and course grades, just 3 things, 3 indicators that we know are early warning signs. It's not meant to tell me everything about a student, but early warning signs that hope may be at risk of not achieving. The district can drill down and see a whole list of every student they have, and then each student has a risk indicator of from 1 to 6. So if a student's red, they're at high risk. They're green, they're at low risk. And so schools can have the system set up to send them an email. These 7 kids are at risk today. Maybe the counselor goes and talks to those 7 kids today. So it really is meant to be just, these are the kids we're seeing a flag on. There may be a very good reason that Hope is flagging, and the school knows that, but at least the system can identify them and flag them pretty quickly. We do have 2 major build outs that we're working on right now. So the system as it sits, again, set up to identify your at-risk students and look at disproportionality in behavior in office discipline referrals. But we're working on an assessment dashboard that will launch this fall, as well as a graduation dashboard. So I can see very quickly my students who are at risk of not graduating, why they're at risk of not graduating. Counselors can then intervene and help early on, instead of waiting until at some point someone has to find that data. All right, and that's all. Do you have any questions? No, that's a lot.
Can you all see the potential for being able to identify these at-risk kids a lot earlier than, and if we go back to what we talked about at the first commission meeting we had, focused on what are some of the characteristics of these kids that perpetuate violence in our schools. And a lot of these data, if I'm not mistaken, are actually represented in this database, are they not?
Well, they can be.
Their attendance.
Yeah, so things like, if you're looking at attendance, behavior, if early early and often office discipline referrals could be an indicator, attendance definitely,
Mhm.
and then grades. So if you combine all three of those together and you're risk ranking students, yeah, it's a quick way to see we typically don't see all three of those together without having to pull them and do some digging. So,
Yeah, it's really unusual to be able to have it to pull it all together that way.
First of all, thanks. I mean, it's great information. If I understood you right, you said it was not all school districts were using it. So a couple
correct.
questions. And the school districts that are using it, is it across the district, all the campuses in those schools? And what do you need to get all of the school districts doing this?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, no, it's not every every building in the school. Some districts will see high usage in one building and not in others. But for those districts we do have a few districts that it is a district-wide initiative and they're using it very regularly in every building. So I think, what do we need right now? I've really worked with the company recently to talk about how we can better implement like a district-wide approach. So we're addressing that at the moment, I feel like, and we do have a very concentrated effort this summer to provide training and support. So at the moment, I feel like we have a good plan, and it's just we're in year 2 and trying to get the word out there and continue to help have people utilize the product.
But would more resources help get that out quicker, I guess is my question. Or is it just because of the training and the time it would take to get everybody on board?
Yeah, I think it's just the time. It really is. It's new to a lot of people, and a lot of people already had things they were using. And so just as people organically use it and see the need for it, like when I showed it in Thrive last week, the principals were all in. So I think having those experiences, and we're building it into everything we can at the department. Yeah.
This priority list says assessment dashboard. What types of assessments are you talking about there? Is that academic assessments or other type?
Yeah. So right now it's academic assessments. So all the state data that we have access to, their ACT Aspire scores, ACT scores, their interim scores. So that's the information that's coming in.
Is there anything in the works to like a threat assessment type dashboard that we could look at? Last week, we heard from a presenter that talked about threat assessment teams and things, and talking to a superintendent this week. He was extremely concerned about liability for the school districts by identifying students and labeling students and things getting out like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if we could use data from these sources, the discipline, these types of things. If this could somehow use data, that would take away the subjectivity of threat assessment teams and make it an objective assessment. If there's any idea or ways that we could manipulate this to do that, I think that would be a big help in getting school districts on board for these threat assessment teams that we've been talking about.
Okay.
I think maybe you're talking about apples and oranges, because I think in the threat assessment process, it's somebody has come forward with a threat. And so the threat assessment team is going to evaluate the credibility of that threat, where this is trying to get a kid that may possibly be, in some stage of development along the pathway to violence for a wide variety of different reasons, that they might be able to be identified and get the kind of help. Now, threat assessment can do that too. Instead of directly going to discipline, they're going to end up getting some additional help. But how the information comes in, to me, is very different. Somebody comes on the threat assessment side and says, Bill, because he's sitting next to me, Bill made a comment about wanting to hurt himself. And so then that perpetuates the threat assessment process, where what this does, it looks at key variables that may be important in that kid potentially getting on the pathway to violence, depending upon what is there, and tries to help them through and keeps them potentially out of the criminal justice system.
Well, and I would say even smart data is even broader than that. It really is used for all students. So looking at all students, I think definitely it may flag up some students who have that potential, but really there's kids that maybe they just got behind in their grades because mom died or something last week, and nobody's picked up on that. So really, it's a larger kind of umbrella to look at all kids. And we do in training really talk about this is not used to label kids, and we don't want it to be used that way. We really want it to be kind of that first touch point of we are seeing these kids as some kind of concern at the district. We need to dig in further. Now, I could see where if the threat assessment team could use the dashboard, if there is a threat assessment, they could go in and have all their data in one place about that student. That could be a very powerful tool for that team to have the data they need at their hands as they're making decisions.
But that threat assessment team could use this data though in its analysis. I believe if we saw a threat, you could look and see if there was other things using this database to help.
It'll give additional information about the student.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's all it'll do.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially, it'll pull every piece of data we have on that student to one place. So then you can use that data to make the decision.
But wouldn't it also be an early warning before that student gets to the threat team?
If in those 3 areas, there's something that's lagging, if their attendance is low there. So, it just depends on the level of threat from the child. Yep.
Great job.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's just amazing to me sometimes that when you really start to look for stuff, all the stuff that we do end up finding. And this is why I think us being able to identify all the things that we're currently doing under the umbrella of school safety is extremely important. And there's quite a bit out there. The next thing that I want to talk about before we actually get to the chairs reporting out today is, we do have an interim report, and it's my understanding that you all wanted to talk a little bit more about how we structure that interim report. I think it's really important that we focus on a lot of the progress that's been made since the 2018 report was submitted to the governor, and being able to detail a lot of the stuff that's in there. I mean, Courtney provided us with a document that had all the laws that we've passed since 2018. And, Angela, if we can make sure that we've got copies of all the acts that those laws reference, and those would be an appendix. We also need to focus on, of the 30 recommendations, which ones haven't been achieved yet. Now we're going to do our assessment, and we're going to talk about questions here in a minute. But then the other key thing is going to be also what new recommendations. So as far as the interim report, I think providing as much detail on the progress that's been made is going to be critically important, and identifying what we haven't achieved yet. And interestingly enough, there's very little that hadn't, which is kind of really awesome. But because of new events, we've also identified other things that we want to look at. So, and going back over the report, there's some language changes and things along those lines. So that to me is what is in a framework in my mind. Does that seem clear to you all? Because that's going right down the executive order and presenting it in the way that it's included in the executive order. And then the next big thing that we're working on is being able to identify questions for a new assessment. And I know that you all have spent quite a bit of time in subcommittees working on that, and I greatly appreciate the time that's been spent on that. But we really need to finalize those questions as soon as possible. Now, I don't know if when you go to present today, if there's any questions that you want to get the commission's take on, feel free to do that. That's completely up to you. But hopefully we can get those done this week, and then we can get the new assessment sent out as quickly as possible. And it sounds like it's going to be a lot less lengthy than it was last time, because we asked a bunch of questions last time. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, then if there are no objections or no questions, then let's move on to chair's reports. Lori?
Thank you, Dr. May. So our subcommittee met Friday the 1st, and we had our SMEs in attendance, but also a couple of invited guests that presented to us. We had Dr. Michael Farrell from the Fort Smith School District, and then Stacy Smith from Arkansas Department of Education that both spoke. Dr. Farrell presented to us about their anonymous reporting tip line that they use in their district, and kind of gave us some information about the history of how they came to that, what it's done for them, some of the data that they've gained in the last 3 years of using that tip line. Was even able to talk about costs with us, about how that works for them, and also then shared how that goes into their behavior threat assessment team and how those two work together. It was wonderful information. He gave us just a lot to think about, and it was very helpful to us. And then Stacy Smith came and talked about both the Thrive program that we've heard about today, but also the AWARE grant that Department of Education, Dr. Betsy Kendall, has been working on, and she's in her 4th year, I believe, of a 5-year grant. And they were able to kind of share some of the things that those two grants have funded and have done in terms of training our schools. We talked about the SHAPE assessment as it relates to a climate assessment for our schools that is available to all schools in Arkansas, and Betsy uses that with all of the schools that she's working with through AWARE. We got lots of links and resources from both of them in terms of things going on right now. And from there, that consumed most of our meeting, but it was really, really good information for us to consider. From there, we talked about getting ready to determine our questions for survey. We have a draft list of those that has been sent out to the subcommittee. And while we do have a speaker, I believe, in this week's meeting, I'm hoping that we can commit some time to working on that list and finalizing and whittling it down, because it's very long at this point. And let's see, what else did we talk about? We have another school that we know of that has an anonymous tip line and behavioral threat team working together. We talked about considering inviting them to speak at some point. They are. Okay, and they will be coming on the 15th. That's Springdale School District. And we talked about one of our recommendations in our last report had to deal with youth mental health first aid and the availability of all school personnel to have access to that training. Part of that has been put into place that all counselors and SROs now are required to go through that training. But the AWARE project has funded a great deal of that training in conjunction with CJI. And we have a whole lot of folks now trained in the state, which is incredible. That's been something we've made a lot of progress toward. So we will continue working to support schools and encouraging them to be a part of that training for all their staff, because it's very beneficial for just everybody, not just counselors and SROs. And with that, we adjourned.
Let me add a couple of things that great report, Lori. We also talked about how we're going to start looking at different states
Yes.
and how they handle anonymous reporting systems. And we did spend a little bit of time talking about, students' comfort when it comes to reporting and the issue of texting or a QR code, something that, could be put on the back of a bathroom stall, something that could be done in privacy. So those were some of the things that you all spent quite a bit talking about too, Lori.
That is correct. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was one thing that Dr. Farrell, when we spoke with him and kind of asked him that question about if this was something that all schools had access to, rather than each school having to contract out and spend money. His opinion was that schools would absolutely access that and utilize that if it was available to them. Especially if there was a way that
More of a statewide approach.
Yes, having that entire statewide coverage rather than each school doing their own thing and having to pay a lot of thousands of dollars to access something like that. We felt like he agreed that a statewide mechanism would be the most beneficial.
Super. And yeah, that committee is going to dive deep into that one over the next couple of months.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Madam
How are you,
Chair,
Sheriff?
I would like to defer to Sheriff Bill Hollenbeck, serving as a chief now, but he'll always be sheriff. He ran the meetings in my absence, so I'll let him give our report.
So happy to give the report, Tim. Thank you for this honor. We, no, seriously, early on, we kind of discussed working strictly on the survey questions to try to get ahead of that curve or try to catch up to that curve, actually. And so we came up with 8 potential survey questions. And if you like, I certainly can read them, or I think there was a discussion with Sheriff Heller that we might add one more. But on the survey question number 1, does your campus have a dedicated armed presence at elementary, middle, junior high, high school, or other educational sites? Is it financially practical for your district to hire school resource officers or commissioned school security officers for all campuses within your district? Was question number 2. Number 3, does your district utilize commissioned school security officers at all district campuses? If yes, how many commissioned school security officers? Number 4 was, do you require additional standards other than the minimum standards for commissioned school security officers? We'd also like to add that language for the school resource officers or institutional police officers as well. If additional funding was available to hire school resource officers or commissioned school security officers, would your district utilize that funding? Number 6, does your district have a memo of understanding with local law enforcement and other first responders? Number 7, does your district currently offer active shooter training for your staff? Number 8, do your school resource officers or commissioned school security officers have access to the following tactical equipment on their assigned campuses? Level 4 body or level 4 ballistic body armor, ballistic rated shields, and breaching tools to include door ram, prying tools, and bolt cutters. So those were the 8 possible survey questions that we are looking at. And that's my report.
Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about what other things you all might be looking at going forward?
Are you referring to the possible recommendations or?
Yeah.
you would catch me on that where I don't.
Yeah,
have
no,
that one.
no, not my intent to catch you. I just,
There you go.
I just think you guys are doing
Sure.
some real interesting stuff.
Sure. We, I think I might have mentioned last week that the sharing of grandmaster keys concept with law enforcement first responders was going to go to the security subcommittee. We're also possibly looking at recommending active shooter training for all law enforcement officers, including SROs and commissioned school security officers statewide, and trying to determine which group would provide that uniform type of training.
To come up with a standardized list of objectives that would be covered under an active shooter class.
Correct. Also, we looked at, we talked about the forcible entry tools and level 4 body armor. Also, specific training for all institutional law enforcement officers, SROs, and commissioned school security officers in some sort of a yearly networking class to try to get up-to-date type of training and education for those officers. And that's so far what we're looking at. We also talked about model districts to expand on not just the minimum standards for the commissioned school security officers, that we would probably make recommendations to expand that minimum training to allow other type of training. And that would also include the institutional police agencies to have some model school districts to try to emulate, to try to get the training increased and enhanced for these other armed presence, whether it's a agency or commissioned school security.
And mutual aid agreements.
Yes, correct. We did talk about mutual aid, that we were going to recommend that all districts, including school districts or institutional agencies and SROs, to have mutual aid agreements and or policy in place with local law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's local or county, regardless, even if they have an SRO, they have an association with one of those agencies, but it's all the other agencies within the county under that MOU. And I think you guys were talking about incident command policies. So you guys got a lot going on is what I wanted to demonstrate. Thank you.
So the audit subcommittee met on Thursday, and we had a very lengthy and a very good discussion with Steve Vera, who is the school district's, our director of security for the Bentonville School District. And he discussed how he does audits at his schools. And he's got 23 schools in his district, and he audits every one of them monthly, which we thought was pretty good. It's really a very simple audit that he does. He actually has a program where he can do the audit on his phone. And the results of that audit are emailed to not only the principal at that campus, but also to the superintendent for that school district. And he basically asks just a few simple, or not ask, it looks at a few simple things. One, he's looking at perimeter doors. He's looking at interior doors, making sure all of those are locked properly. Also looking at the staff, making sure that they're wearing their badges and they're IDing anyone who is not. And looks at visitor security, and also the making sure that their drills have been completed on time. And basically what he's done is create a culture of security within that district by doing that. And I think I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but the audits that he does is also tied to performance evaluations for that principal and so forth. So, and one of the questions I asked him and we got done, I said, okay, you're going to, each school, so each 23 schools, and I asked him, I said, but that audit is probably done internally by that principal or some of the staff to make sure that when you get there, that they're not failing that audit. And he said, absolutely. And, that's what is creating that culture of security. People are walking in, they're expecting to be audited. Therefore, they don't know who's auditing. So they're looking when normal school day of making sure that all their doors are locked, that our visitors are checked and so forth. That spent most of our time on that. We did work on the survey questions, and I think we'll have those finalized this week. And we talked a little bit more about the integrating and make sure that the local emergency managers are tied in with the school emergency operations plans and their exercises. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Steve really did a great job, and I thought it was a phenomenal example of how to create that culture of security at the school. And he's one individual. I think I asked him the question, well, is this something that you can teach somebody else to do so that he doesn't have to do all the audits themselves? And he said, no, it's definitely something that he wanted to do himself. So I think it's definitely something that we need to look at it as a potential model, because what that does is that makes that security is everybody's responsibility on that campus, and they're held accountable. So it was really enlightening. He did a great job. Anybody else on the committee want to comment on that? No? Okay, cool. Thank you, Director Gary. I think intelligence and communications up next, Chief Chapman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So we met last Wednesday, a very lengthy meeting. Actually, a lot of great topics were discussed. We started out by looking at our recommendations and agreed that most of them are still valid, but there needs to be some clarification, whether that's terminology or being more specific about what that recommendation meant. We need to continue to work on determining the success of the 2018 recommendations. And then tomorrow's meeting will actually finalize our recommendations and survey questions, primarily our survey questions. Courtney and Secretary Cook met with the Department of Education and the Fusion Center. They continued conversations on an MOU that would allow them to work together, I guess, utilizing different intelligence platforms to strengthen our capabilities. Maybe some future discussion on that. Director Gary stated that there's still ongoing conversations with his office and the Fusion Center about cybersecurity and the capabilities between the two agencies. And then we had a subject matter expert presentation by Penny Rubo. She is the AWIN project director, I believe is her official title. And we talked about the AWIN capability, which ties back to recommendation 2, as far as schools having direct lines of communications with law enforcement and other partners. Very eye-opening. Ms. Rubo is obviously the best versed person I've ever spoke to about AWINs, and some of the information she shared with us was very eye-opening. So she did start off by saying that there's 2 areas in the state of Arkansas that probably doesn't have the best coverage in the state based on topography. That's basically our 2 layers of top counties in the northern part of the state, and then some of our west central to the other side of Garland County. They have AWINS capability, but the coverage may not be as well as the flatlands, so to speak. So we talked about some of those issues there. We talked about the primary users on the current system. The system was built out, I guess, with the concept of law enforcement, fire, and EMS, and that's the primary users. There's 38,000 current users, and that number is growing based on local agencies doing the build out. Then we talked about the schools that were currently using AWINs. We talked about Rogers School District being probably one of the best examples of a local school district utilizing AWIN, and the process they went through in preparing a communication plan. And they may be an example of how we recommend other schools chasing down that path. Each school district has to apply for AWIN's acceptance. Penny talked just a little bit about that process. Not a difficult process, but they have to develop a communication plan and present that. And then they have to work with their local agency, whether that's a county or a municipality who built out the AWIN system, because AWINS is a partnership between local municipalities, sheriff's departments, local counties, and then Adam and that process. So there has to be a partnership there. Potentially some MOUs need to be in place and some agreements there. We also, Penny talked about reaching out to surrounding states and to see exactly how they interface with their school districts at the state level. Specifically talked about Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. They all allow their school systems on the AWINS platform or their version of the AWINS platform. And then she specifically asked them about how they build in communication training from an emergency level, emergency critical incident level. And we'll probably get a report back. Louisiana said they definitely use that as part of their training, but there's some mixed answers on that right now. So she stressed that coverage across the majority of the state is adequate, and she believes that adding the current 460 SROs to the AWIN system would not decrease capacity or the ability for AWINs to operate effectively. But we also had some discussion on how it would need to be more than the SROs. And we talked about how that would really look at a school level from a critical incident command situation. Your SRO is going to be tied up. He may not be the person talking on your radio and may not be the person at incident command. So obviously it'd be more than 460 users, but she felt that capacity was adequate if we went down that road. We talked about the cost for rural agencies and school districts. You know, the cost is for communication equipment can range anywhere from $900 a radio to $6,000 a radio. So there's always the issue of where that funding comes from. So we talked about some possible grants in the future and how they may work and tie into the ability for schools to do that. And, you know, not all areas in the state or districts or municipalities or sheriff's departments are on AWINs. But we talked about the importance of them having the capability to be on AWINs, because if we have an incident in rural Arkansas, the likelihood of having a multi-agency response is very high, matter of fact, guaranteed. And eventually the state would be involved at some level. So having those local officials having the radio equipment to at least switch over to AWINs is pretty critical. And so that has to be part of maybe tweaking that recommendation a little bit, and we'll have those discussions. Overall information and conversation was relevant and very revealing, and gave us some things that we need to follow up on. We have two subject matter expert presentations on July 6th, July 6th, we'll detail and finalize our recommendations, survey questions. And then July 13th, we have Courtney has arranged a SME reference cybersecurity. Is that correct, ma'am?
Correct.
And then we have an SME presentation from Marvin concerning Little Rock School District's Gaggle program that they use for intelligence reporting and sharing of information. So that concludes my report, ma'am.
The only thing I might add to that is that, is there not some local departments that aren't part of AWIN?
Oh, absolutely. And we talked about that. There are a lot of agencies that just aren't on the system yet. And we still have to have that capability at those local agencies, those rural agencies, to communicate on the AWINS platform at some point in time during a critical incident. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure that we knew that they would end up having to have a different radio system. And I'm sure that can get pretty complicated.
We'll clarify that, AJ Gary. They wouldn't necessarily have to have a different radio system, but they would have to have a radio that's capable of picking up the system. Is that correct?
Right. The multi-band. And yeah, they all in all the 911 centers, they have the capability to talk on AWIN. It may just be command and control and not full-time AWIN users.
Okay, gotcha. Any questions on intelligence and communications? Good report, Chief. Director Kane?
Yes, ma'am. We Physical Security Subcommittee met last Wednesday morning. We spent the large portion of our meeting talking about reviewing our survey questions and talking about physical security priorities. We came up with 16 of them, and those were emailed out for a final review and for everyone on the subcommittee to look at. The basically what was decided was to use the physical security priorities in the form of questions. However, there were 2 or 3 that were added in there. One of them has the district provided current or updated floor plans and pertinent emergency contact information to appropriate first responders. Another question added was, does the district use installed barricade or secondary devices on classrooms door in the events of a lockdown? And also there was a question added does the district have a Grand Master key for all locks in the district and readily available to share Grand Master key with local law enforcement? And that was Chief Hollenbeck's ideal. That's also probably going to be one of our recommendations that comes out. So the rest of them are already in the physical securities that Dr. May presented. Dr. May, do you want me to go through the other questions now? Or?
You do whatever you feel
Okay.
is necessary.
And again, it was kind of a discussion on physical priorities, but also translated into questions. And one that we all agreed on was, does the district campuses have electronic access controls on all exterior doors? We asked the same question on electronic access controls on all classroom doors. Another question was, district campuses, are they equipped? Do they equip classroom doors with locks so that the doors can be locked from the inside and allow for key access from the outside for authorized personnel, as well as allows for egress? And we looked at a video of one of the devices that's out there. There's several out there that allows for all 3 of these aspects, because that's important when it comes to that. It has to be obviously locked from the inside, but also allow for key access from the outside from authorized personnel, as well as allowing for egress. So another question was, do district campuses have one visitor point of entrance for the main campus building? Do district campuses have secured vestibules at the main entrance? Do district campuses require visitors to sign in or check in and wear badges? Do district campuses have a bullet-related anti-shatter resistant glass and wall at reception desk check-in? Do district campuses have physical barriers such as bollards, landscaping, fencing, low walls, et cetera, at school entrances, especially at the main entrance? Do district campuses have numbers on classrooms or on exterior windows so first responders can reference position of students and intruders? And do campuses use vision panels on classrooms doors that allow students a blind area to hide? Do district campuses have security cameras that are monitored by designated individuals? So those were the 16. We've sent those out and we're going to finalize those tomorrow. We also spent some time, like I said, talking about physical security priorities. I think there was some good discussion, and we kind of went around with the remaining time, kind of ran around the horn and asked everyone, can you give your top 3 to 5? There seemed to be agreement on certainly access control for buildings with a preference for electronic access control. Of course, obviously there's a cost there. There was agreement also on classroom door access. There was a lot of discussion on barricade devices and concerns raised as far as egress of those. And that question was added to it for that reason. Secure vestibules seemed to be a pretty popular one, and the Grand Master key available for law enforcement was another. And so what we're probably looking at tomorrow's meeting is to spend more time on that once our survey questions get finalized. As far as possible recommendations, one important item that Courtney made me aware of last week, and we talked about a little bit in this meeting, is we're going to have to look at language in 1213-109 that requires all doors and exits to remain unlocked. Because that's something that we're going to have to seriously look at, and that's probably going to be a recommendation. Now, that's in the context of drills, but it's still language says that doors must remain unlocked. And that's going against pretty much everything we're trying to do here as far as access control on doors. And if anybody else on the subcommittee, if I've left anything out, please speak up.
Appreciate you all very, very much. Now, we've got a number of superintendents in here and you guys have been kind of quiet. Not that I'm going to pick on you, but I'd really like to hear your perspective on some of these things that we've talked about.
Well, I'll start with saying that, I mean, there's a lot of good information that just keeps flowing out that I'm sitting here thinking, I've got my notes here about, I need to go back and follow up on this. Look, you know, the very first two presentations that we had. And I was gonna get with you after this and just have a private conversation with you, but I'll go ahead and kind of
Oh,
broach what
just
I'm
make
getting
it
at
public, why
because-
don't we?
Yeah,
right?
because I didn't want to look silly. And I guess where I'm getting at is that CGI, and you may already be doing these things, and I know you do a lot of things there. But somehow or another, can all this stuff together in something that we present to superintendents where that, you know, okay, here's the law, here are these resources available for you here. And somehow or another, can this into a program, a class or something that they would take, but there's something that is available in a class form, but also followed up with all the notes, everything they need right on the front page of CJI, that's superintendents, school superintendents, something of that nature, where they can click it and all this good stuff is just right there. That was a thought that was kind of going through my head as we were going through this.
No, aren't there usually meetings on a regular basis, like through the co-ops where superintendents
There
get
are.
together on a usual, that might be a good venue right there
Yes.
to be able to go and speak. And yeah, we'll be more than happy to put all
Well, and
this.
that's what I meant. I thought you and I could get together
Sure.
and talk about it. And then maybe out of that, we could spend something out of that to bring back to the group and talk more about how we could go about efficiently getting this out. Because I mean, it just seems like, you know, when I go back to the last time that we had our group together, our school's safety committee, and a lot of good things came out of that. And I know they're collecting dust on a shelf somewhere until Uvalde happened. And then everybody's up pulling it all out again, trying to figure out now, where are we? What have we done? And if there was something that we could keep out there, keep current, some sort of a class or something, I don't know, something of that nature that is required to superintendents to take every so often, that brushes us all back up on, here's what's required, here's what's available, here are the resources that are there
Right.
to help you through these things. Because there was a lot of great things we talked about today that are very helpful tools to meet those requirements.
Yeah, and I think I'm scheduled to present on the 11th at the DESI Summit. And there's going to be a couple of things that I've recently learned that I'm going to add to my presentation as a resource for them. Great idea. Great idea. Dr. Hopkins. Yes, ma'am.
And I just wanted to add, at DESI, we have a Safe Schools Coordinator position that's currently vacant right now. But once we fill that position, I think one of the primary responsibilities would be for that person to work with CJI, the Arkansas Center for School Safety, to work on something like that. Because we know there's just a ton of information out there for school districts and hard for them to know everything they need to know, and then also how to meet those requirements. So that's definitely on our priority list as well.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. I just know that, you know, my district is 2,500 students, and I've been in districts, with 450 students, and I know that resources are so scarce a lot of times.
Yeah.
Especially when, just trying to meet the educational needs of the students.
Right.
And then we start branching out in these other areas. And when we were talking about the different, coming in and doing the different evaluations of the district and how these plans are being put together, a lot of times it can feel so overwhelming
Sure.
for a superintendent, and those kind of resources that are put together, that those helping hands to come in and offer all these things, that would be super beneficial.
Yeah, and the thing that I want to emphasize more so than anything else
is that they're at no cost. There doesn't have to be an enormous expense.
That's right. I was so
associated with
impressed with
it.
those first two this morning. Yeah, lots of good stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the
Dr.
second.
Hernandez, anything you want to say, sir?
I'll just echo what Dr. Hawkins said, that there's a lot of information. It's a lot of good information. And I think, something that we talked about in the audits committee, and Dr. Hopkins has brought this up before, is just having people to carry these things out, I think sometimes is an issue. And so just one thing I'll throw out for consideration is that, Courtney had mentioned looking at a school safety position that they're trying to fill at the department, and you'd mentioned co-ops. And so I'll say it again, is it could be valuable that if, co-ops had that kind of resource, like they did a computer science person or some other group, that was the person that helped pull all this together for that local region, because every region's different and every resource is different. And so if there was an expert in some of those co-op regions that could help with school safety, that might help pull all this stuff together in a better way than, leaving it to one person to do it at the district. You almost have that audit person there at the co-op as well, that's making sure that these things are being implemented. So I'll just throw that out again for consideration.
Thanks, Dr. Hernandez. Hi, General. You doing okay, ma'am?
Doing well, Dr. May. Thank you.
Good. Anything you would like to add?
No, ma'am. Just to reiterate everyone else, I think this is great information. We're doing good work and I look forward to our recommendations. So thank you.
Okay, super. Anything else before we take that last and important motion? Bill Gossage is over here shaking. Yeah. Of course it was. I assumed as much. Anything else? You all have done a tremendous amount of work. We're making great progress. I want to thank each and every one of you. And I also want to also mention that the SMEs have worked out really, really well. They have provided a lot of useful information to the subcommittees, and I'm also very, very grateful to them. So next meeting is on the 12th. Anybody want to make a motion? What are you moving? Motion to adjourn, Director Gary. Bill Temple, second. Second motion. Any opposed? Okay, y'all have a great week. I'll see you next Tuesday.